pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to films I should have talked about years ago. And now, why don't we go on ahead and try ourselves something different. Something that's a little more horrifying, yet a bit more recent. I'm specifically talking about what was at the time the latest sequel in the Child's Play series, Cult of Chucky. This was released in 2017, 2 years before the series itself would be completely rebooted with an all-new Chucky, whom was, at the time, a Caslin AI buddy doll, voiced by Mark Hamill. But before all that, we would at least have one last iteration of the original classic Chucky, with Brad Dourif being the voice. In this particular instance, it tends to really do a good job, at least ending off on a high note before the series would be rebooted and it would not do so well in the box office or with attendance numbers. But when you take a look at Cult of Chucky, it still has quite a flair to it that really does help solidify a good ending to the franchise after nearly 30 long years of running continuously between 1988 and 2017. The series itself had gone on quite a tangent. The character has had a lot of mileage, along with the majority of other primary cast members. As a matter of fact, for the character Andy Barclay, they apparently brought along the same actor, who has been Andy the whole entire time. And that is quite an amazing thing. It's like when I talked about Halloween 2018 recently, how they were able to bring back Nick Castle and Jamie Lee Curtis from the original Halloween. 40 years later, we got them both back in the sequel reboots, that is of course Halloween 2018. But the year before then, Cult of Chucky pretty much ends off the entire Child's Play series by giving us one last story to really assist in giving us quite an ending to focus on. It basically picks up from where we left off with Curse of Chucky, which came out in 2013. Cult of Chucky picks off with basically the head of the original Chucky who had been sent over to Andy's house in order to finally find some closure between, well, Andy and Chucky. But unfortunately, upon doing so, this Chucky ends up getting blown by a shotgun. A chunk of the head is missing, and, well, pretty much a lot of things are taken out as this whole film progresses. The opening scene itself is pretty gritty. Yet it does give us the kind of humor and horror that the series has already done. And Brad Dourif still does have that amazing maniacal vibe that we typically get out of most villains in kids shows, but seeing that we have something here with a psychological desire to kill anybody at all, it's really quite an amazing thing. Brad Dourif was, like, at the time, a comedian of horror, the way I see it. And in this latest instance of the original Child's Play series, being that I had known Child's Play for a long time, I mean, I was 18 when that film came out. And man, it's come quite a long way. The fact that they're still going with the series now, I mean, they got out with the reboot pretty much in June 2019. And not to mention, there's actually a live-action series going around. And there's even been talks of a crossover with Freddy Krueger coming soon. So, if that's even possible, then that means Freddy Krueger will be rebooted. Unlike, of course, what happened in 2010, which was a whole different story. But I will say that Cult of Chucky has quite an amazing kick of all things considered. Nika, of course, was one of the latest characters that have been brought on into the series, in which we've first seen Nika in Curse of Chucky, whom is disabled, and ends up getting blamed for certain murders that had happened by Chucky, and not by Nika. But of course, it does take place inside of an institution, where Chucky is in fact attempting to plot a huge takeover, considering a bunch of other Chucky dolls of all sorts of things that had taken place. And let's also not forget that there's also a kill count episode on that. If you do want to check that out, Dead Meat is right up your alley, with James A. Janice as the good old host that we know and love. But let's also not forget that the way that Andy attempts to get into the asylum itself ends up getting locked up, has a Chucky doll brought in which Andy pretty much just takes care of rather quickly. But upon doing so, the leader of the whole entire cult, the actual Chucky that had been there the whole time, ends up locking Andy inside of the cell and then escaping with both Nika as well as Tiffany. And of course, you remember Tiffany way back in the day, then well, this is Tiffany's last incarnation in the original series as well. But just coming to think about something like this, a film that ends on a high note, ends an original series, and sets off a reboot, a possibility of a revitalization of the series itself, seeing as the series had not necessarily been performing as good as it used to be. It was quite a cult classic to most people. Instant classic. But looking at Cult of Chucky, the most recent one, how it performed in the box office and in most reviewers' books out there, including myself, that's where I'm going to go ahead and bring up a score in this film, a 7.6 out of 10. So I'm not really going as far to say that this is dislikable, because that wouldn't really be true. It really is quite an impressive sequel. One that ends the series off on quite a high mark. Very high. It's almost like when you've taken a look at a lot of other franchises and how they were able to end the series off on a high mark as well. But in this particular instance, it seems to be a whole new story due to it being a lot more recent in contrast to many other ending sequels of any sorts. But knowing that the series has been rebooted now, and that there's the possibility of other Chucky-related media coming around left and right, it really does seem that this particular doll is going to stick around for a long, long time. Pretty much. If we're ever going to get back Brad Dourif as well, then who knows? If that's ever going to happen, I guess we'll know for sure. But 7.6 out of 10 is just my overall score on this. And if you're looking for better scores, then well, we're probably not at that point yet. But if you want to see more go down on my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.